Hello Year 8, it's Miss Perry here. We're going to do a demo for your flowers relating to the Day of the Dead. So I've got some examples here. We've got two different types of marigolds. Now marigolds relate to the Day of the Dead because they are said to be the flower of the dead. So they're believed to attract the souls and draw them back. We've also gone for a lily here because lilies are most commonly linked with fresh life and rebirth. So that's why we've gone for the lily. So you might choose some different flowers relating to either your family. It could be a more traditional patriotic flower, say like the daffodil for Wales, or the rose for England. It might be, we're coming into spring now, so we're getting more and more flowers are going to start coming out soon. So you could choose your favourite flower. So I've got some examples here. Now I've copied and used some images off Google as my resources to look at while I was drawing these. Okay, so you should do the same. Find a nice drawing. I've literally typed in lily into Google. I found one that doesn't look too hard to draw, and I've chosen to draw that one. These ones are a little bit more complicated, but marigolds, I would suggest starting off with a design like this to start off with. So making sure you've got a sharp pencil and just a piece of blank paper, and we'll get started. Okay, so we're going to start off with this one here. So the way I started this one here is I have just started with the center petals. Now in the middle of a flower, petals in the center are always smaller, so it's important to always start with small petals in the middle. And then marigolds have got almost like wavy rectangular shapes for the petals. As I'm coming around the edge of the flower, you can see that I'm changing the direction of the petal. You can see I'm not being very specific. I'm just coming out, wiggling a line, and then coming back in again. And for the corners of the flower, you're going to be going out more of a straight angle, like so. And you're just going to follow these petals all the way around, and every layer will get slightly bigger. So you can see we've got smaller on the inside, and we're slowly going to get bigger and bigger with those wiggly rectangular shapes. And anytime you see a gap, so see there's like a gap there, I'm going to add a petal onto that gap, because marigolds are very rounded. So if you look at especially the second marigold we're going to draw, these are really rounded. So getting bigger as we go around. And remember, here the petals come straight down, here the petals go straight up, here they're going to sort of point down but to the side, and here they're going to point up to the side. So just as you're going around, remember to just change the direction that your petals are coming out at. You can see I've got some big gaps in between these petals. So with my last layer then, I will go around the outside and add in a petal in between those glass petals. Now this is just the line part of the drawing. If you wanted to go in with let's do one, I'm going to do one bigger layer around the outside. And all I've done is I've looked at my flower, I've looked back at the the image that I'm copying from, and that's why I've decided to go back around with one bigger layer of petals, like so. Okay, so making sure then, filling in the gaps to make sure it's nice and rounded still. I've got a couple more gaps. You can see a gap there and a gap there. Now, when it comes to adding in shading onto these, it might seem a little bit complicated, but it is just the same thing but repetitive. Okay, so if you look at this one here, you can see that on the inside of the petals it's darker, and I've lifted up my pencil quite quickly to get a lighter shade of grey to leave the edge of each petal white. So that's all you do. I won't do the whole thing now, but literally starting from wherever, you could start from the inside and work your way out, but it doesn't really matter as long as you get each of the petals. So right up to the edge and really quickly lifting off the pressure. And it's because these petals disappear under each other. So the petal is going to be darkest in the area where it goes under the petal before it, and then lightest as it starts to come out. If you've got, see, like that one, that petal there has got the bit that you can see is quite in the middle, so this is fine because we can just go like that. Whereas if you have a petal which is, let's find one now, which is, say, like this one, the center bit is coming out from here, so you'd still do that bit and fade it out, and you just repeat this process over and over and over again with each petal, and that's how you get an effect like that. And this is what these petals would look like. So you can see there it's really dark under here and it's faded out. If you've got colour pencils, please feel free to have a go with colour pencils instead. So darkest underneath where the petal disappears, underneath the other petal, and lightest on your way out. So that then takes us on to our second marigold. So this time we're going to go for this marigold here. Looks quite complicated, but again it can be broken down into its basic shapes. Now this time you can see that this one is really round. So what I've gone for first with this one is to draw a circle. Now I'm just really lightly drawing a circle because this is just a guide, okay? So first of all, we're going to go to the center of the marigold. Now can you see there? You can zoom in. We've got, this is the center of the marigold. So I'm going to come about to the center and I'm just going to do, again, click back off. It's just squiggly shapes to start off with. You don't have to be too accurate, just interlock them quite nicely together. And these ones then, because you can see straight down the center of the petal, you can add, just to create those, like you can see into the petal. Okay, so then it's the same as the last one, but this time we're just going around into the gaps in between these parts first. And it's exactly the same shape almost, so it's quite square, but with a wiggly edge to it. And again, remembering to change direction as you go around. And these again will get bigger as you go around the shape. And just keep going as they get bigger. You can see I'm not being very accurate. The main thing you want to make sure you don't do is make it look like it's too perfect. So even though you can see I'm trying to find in between the petals and then adding more petals there, I'm making sure I'm not being perfect with it, because nature, although nature you can see by these flowers, they are quite geometrical, they're not perfect maths. Okay, so they're natural forms, and we do this randomness to show that they're natural forms. Just keep going and getting bigger. If you feel like you are confident with this flower, you can skip ahead, as we do only have the hour lesson. So if we were in class, we'd just use those ready-made drawings. Just keep going around. Make sure you're using a sharp pencil as well with this. So getting bigger. Making sure you're varying the shape that you're using as well. We don't want to use too much of the same wiggly shape, as each petal is going to be a different shape. Just making sure though that you're bringing that line back down to the petal below it. With the shading for this one, it's going to be pretty similar to our last flower, but this one you don't need to add such darker tones to it. Keep going around, and I'm going to keep going until I get to that circle on the outside. And what I'm going to do is I'm only going to keep adding petals to the sides that haven't quite got to the edge of that circle, making sure those petals are going right underneath the petals before, and that they are getting bigger with each layer. You can see it's just repetitive shapes. So it can seem quite daunting at first to draw a marigold, but once you get the right kind of shapes going, it is just repeating the same process over and over again. There we go. So now I've pretty much got to my circle all the way round. Now, as these marigolds are quite a bit rounder, you can see they're almost perfectly round. I'm going to just go back around the edge of mine and just add in anywhere I can see it's a little bit too misshapen, not quite as circular, just adding in some extras in between. You can see I've started to shade this one here. The same thing again, but just a lot lighter, and then add in those center bits to the very, very middle petals, because you can see all the way down them. Then we've got our last flower, which is the lily. So the way you draw a lily, again, I've just got an image off Google. This is the one that I copied for my last one. There are loads of good videos on YouTube as well if you wanted to do a more detailed one, but just for time purposes, I will quickly show you how I did this one. So with the lily now, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 petals. Now can you see that this petal is in front of this side and this side? So I'm going to start with this petal purely because it's the one that's in the front. Okay, so I'm just curving that shape with my wrist. We're just lightly drawing this to start off with. So next I'm going to go for the petal that is just below and just next door to that first one. You might think lilies have more like perfect shaped petals, but if you again are going for a more realistic looking one, we are going to have some impurities in there. If you ever make a mistake as well, don't feel bad for needing to rub it out. That's why we lightly draw stuff to start off with, so that we can rub it out if we need to. So the petals, can you see how they're curving into the center? And we'll add more detail to that once we've got all the petals down. Just keep looking back at any images that you're using. Remember the difference in year 7 of your orange drawings? The difference of when you're looking at something compared to when you're not looking at something really is quite different. So yeah, make sure you keep referring back to that image that you're copying. Like I said, I just typed in lily into Google. And I just picked one that I thought looked nice. Right, so in the centre of a lily then, we have got pollen. Now the pollen, it's quite a few. I thought there was only 3 or 4. But in the drawing that I'm copying, there's actually 6. So I'm just going to draw these in because then I can start to add detail to the centre. But because these bits do block out quite a bit, I think they all come into the centre. I'm just going to add in those pollen stems. And lilies, they stain your clothes as well. So if you've got any lilies, don't wear white around them. Right, so next we're going to go for the detail on the petals. Okay, so as with most flowers, it's got a darker line running down the middle. You can see it varies in each petal, but generally there's a darker line coming in the middle. And depending on the colour of the petal that you've, of the lily that you've chosen, will depend on the amount of shading that you're going to need to do. Okay, so this one, and again, it's just making sure the directions of this. So obviously a flower, it's not a flat object, it's got 3D-ness to it. So we need to make sure that we can see that. Shading it darker as it enters the center. And again, I am doing this really quickly. You guys can spend much longer on this. And it's just varying that pencil pressure so that you can capture the shapes of those petals. Now the examples I showed you that I'd already done, I spent about an hour flat out working on those, so do take your time, don't rush. Remember, quality is better than quantity. So can you see I've just drawn that darker line and I'm just lightly going over the edge of it and fading it out. You can do the edge of the petals as well. Darker on the edge and fading them in. And this is just the first layer of detail, so I will go into this with more detail if I've got time at the end. I don't want this video to be too long though. And by all means, if you're confident by what you've watched so far, just get started. And just making sure, so this, I'm not just going to come straight down there. I'm just going to make sure that it's definitely coming out of the center of the flower, like so. Again, it's going to be darkest in the center. Each petal is not going to be exactly the same, so I'm going to rub that out a little bit. And there's more shading on this top part of the lily. And there are loads of different colour lilies. You might have some really dark pink ones. It depends which one you want to choose. There's blue ones, yellow ones, orange ones. And again, if you want to use colour instead of pencil, please feel free. But it's the same premise of using those changes in pencil pressure. We'll just be incorporating colours into it as well. This petal's got much darker colours on it. And those colours seem to come out a little bit further at the top. Remember not to, unless you're 100% sure that that bit is dark, don't press too hard when you're shading. Because you can get some really, really nice 3D-ness just by adding in some lighter grey tones. This petal doesn't really have that much shading on it. A little bit on one side. As I said, we've only got an hour for a lesson. I know you guys are doing 50 minutes at the moment to make sure you don't get tired. So by all means, you can get started. So you can choose either a lily or a marigold. Could be daffodils are quite easy to draw. I've only got one more petal on there, so if I could quickly show you, you've got bluebells, which could be, it's like a squiggly line like that, into a trumpet shape, add some lines down it, and add in some pollen in the center. These then would be attached onto a stem, which would have multiple bluebells on it. You can draw the bell shape first, and then add the squiggly line for the trumpet part. So bluebells are really easy to draw. Tulips would kind of be in between a lily and an upside down bluebell. So you could either draw them like that, or you can go for the individual petals. And so the Day of the Dead, you can choose whatever flowers. You could be asking a family member what their favourite flower is. Obviously the marigolds are more traditional. Lilies have a nice meaning to them. But if it was your family celebrating the Day of the Dead, then what flowers could represent your family? Say like if you're Welsh, it could be a daffodil with a trumpet and the petals coming out. And then just add in detail in there. So we're just practicing drawing flowers today. Okay, guys? So marigold, a lily, or one that represents your family. Okay, so please send a picture of your work to your teachers and refer to any images on Google or previous lesson PowerPoints to help you. Okay, thanks guys.